Okay, so at this point, I'm a freshman in high school. I'm at Harvard Westlake. I'm getting straight A's. I got straight A's. I was known as like an excellent student. I'm at Harvard Westlake, one of the best schools in the country. The teachers love me. I'm always like the teacher's pet. Teachers just amazed by me. I was always I was great in every one of my classes, like my geometry class. I remember I was so good at geometry, I would get 100% on every single test or higher because they would sometimes give extra credit. And I remember everyone else in my class was struggling. But I just remember like at first I was struggling and people in my class were doing okay, but I studied so hard and I would just like read the book over and over. I was, like I said, I'm an INTP, Enneagram 5-54. So I remember I was a dude who would always go into silent study. Like all day I would be in the silent study and I would study. I was always that way. So I would just be reading the book the whole day. And then finally, like it just clicked for me. And then after that, once geometry clicked for me, I always got 100% or higher. And everyone else in my class was struggling. And it got to the point where I would be in my geometry class studying other classes. Like my teacher said, Ryan, once you get below 100%, you're going to have to start listening in class. And but because I got 100% on everything, I would be in my geometry class reading my history book because the teacher couldn't do anything about it because he would see me reading my history book, but he was like, once you get below 100%, you're not allowed to study history in geometry class. But I never got below 100%, so I always would study other classes in my geometry class. So like I would do very well, and the teachers loved me. The teachers were just amazed by me. Like I had history teachers, teachers just be like, how do you remember that? How do you know that? I think it's because I was good. I was good with academic stuff. I was always like that with that. And I worked hard with it. And I probably, maybe my synesthesia helped. I don't know what else it was, but I did good with all that stuff. So I was doing well in my academic stuff. And also I was, my seventh grade, we won the championship. I was the MVP. Eighth grade, we won the championship. I was MVP. Ninth grade, I'm the starting point guard on varsity. And I'm still doing very good academically. But like I said, there's problems. My shot's messed up. I'm still a good player. I'm the starting point guard. But right now, at this point, I'm the starting point guard. My whole life, I was known for being the best shooter in the country. One of the best players in the country, but the best shooter. And now I'm not known for shooting at all. I don't shoot the ball anymore. At that point, I was just a dribbler and a passer. I led the team in assists, but I wasn't shooting anymore. And that's the problem. And I know it's because of shooting machine. Now, again, I think that my dad probably thinks it's because you're shooting overhead. And that probably was what messed up my shot because he wanted me to start shooting overhead. And he thought that maybe when I started shooting overhead, that started making me shoot square. But he doesn't know, and I do know, I would have been still shooting sideways if I was moving into the shots the correct way. It's all about how you move into shots. The reason why I started shooting not sideways like my dad didn't want me to do, my dad said the reason I was such a good shooter was I shot sideways. He was like, why aren't you shooting sideways? I know it's because of the way I was picking the ball off of the rack and moving into shots. I couldn't shoot sideways. And I was shooting the ball incorrectly. So I'm a starting point guard on varsity as a freshman. We win the CIF championship. But my dad, I'm shooting bad. Now, this is an interesting thing. I remember there were times when I would shoot decent. And I know it was when my dad would be in the backyard with me and he'd be passing to me. Because sometimes he would pick the ball off the rack and he would start passing to me. And I would be shooting. My dad would be like, you're shooting good now. And this is more evidence that I would say, it's more evidence that it was a shoot away rack that was the problem. Because I would be shooting good. And now my dad, yeah, you're shooting more sideways. And I know it's because he was passing to me. And again, I'm unconscious. I don't know what I'm doing. He's passing me, so I'm going to be automatically aligning to what's perfect. I'm still unconscious at this point. So I'm catching the ball, I'm shooting sideways like he wants. I know it's because of how I'm moving into the shots. So he's passing me, but then I would go back, when he'd be done passing to me, picking the ball off the rack, I would go back to picking the ball off the rack myself and shooting, and I know that would mess up my shot. So at that point, okay, I'm starting point guard. We won the CIF championship. We played against James Harden for the state semifinals, and we lost by 1 point. And then James Harden's team ended up winning the state championship by like 20-something points. So if it wasn't for the fact that we lost by 1 point to James Harden, we probably would have won the state championship too. So, and I'm the starting point guard. But the thing is, at this point, my shot's messed up. Now, I remember I was talking to my friend Malik not too long ago, probably like 2018. And my friend Malik was like, and I tried to tell him, yeah, what happened was the shooting machine. And my friend Malik was like, he wanted to doubt me. He wanted to dismiss me. And he was like, it wasn't because of the shoot away machine, man. It's because, everybody's a good shooter when they're shooting underhand, but you started shooting overhead like everybody in your shotgun. See, a lot of people just want to freaking dismiss me. And they don't. And he was like, well, how could the shoot away machine mess up your shot if you're a good shooter? He doesn't know what the shoot away machine did. And also, like, for him, he's conscious of how he shoots. He doesn't know that the reason why I was such a good shooter was because I was unconscious. So when the shoot away machine messed up my shot, I didn't know how to fix it. Now, for him, for someone who was always conscious of how he shot, it wouldn't be such a big deal to have a shoot away machine because he'd be able to adjust it because he was always aware of what he's doing. That's why he was not as good of a shooter as I was, because I wasn't aware of what I was doing. And that's why I was such a good shooter, because I would just align automatically to what was good because I wasn't thinking about it. I never thought when I played. And even when I had the shooting machine, I still wasn't thinking. But the problem was I wasn't thinking, and I was picking the ball off of a rack and shooting the ball, and therefore it was misaligning me. It was kind of corrupting my form. So we win the CIF championship, but at the same time, my shots messed up. I'm not scoring. I was leading, like I said, I led the team in assists. But as my mom said, you're a shooter, you're a scorer. What's wrong with you? She never went to any of my games my freshman year of high school. And she said that she was embarrassed. She went to my first game and she was like, I'm embarrassed. I can't go to any more of your games because you suck now. So, and the thing is, like, I look at my mom and I'm like, the thing is, like, honestly, I think about it and I'm like, she just doesn't know. And I don't feel like, I don't look at her and I'm like, well, you're an evil person. I really don't think so. Because in my mind, I'm like, she was right. There was something seriously wrong with me. But she doesn't realize it was a shoot away machine. She thought there was something wrong with me as opposed to, like, my environment that was screwing me up. So I understand what she was getting at. Like, I'm not upset with her about that. She's like, there's something seriously freaking wrong. Now, just to go in more depth about this was, I remember, like, my grandpa would later say, like, it wasn't because of the shooting machine that was a problem. You see, everyone freaking tried to dismiss me. In college, I tried to explain after college, I tried to explain to my grandpa what happened. My grandpa was like, it wasn't a shoot away. He said, what happened was, you were playing against bigger, better players, and you started to get frustrated, and then you started to take your frustration out on your dad, and that's why your dad started beating you up, and that's why the problem started happening, because you were just playing against bigger, better players. I mean, that's obvious, right? That's what he thought, but he wasn't even there, so he wouldn't even know. He just wanted to dismiss me and make my dad the good guy. Now the problem with that is, and then I tried to explain this to him, but then my grandpa tried to cover his ears like, nah, blah, 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 blah. He wants me to take responsibility, but he doesn't realize that I'm really not responsible for it. So then I tried to tell my grandpa that's not the case, because I remember it was the 7th grade when me and my dad started to get in big fights about my shot, and because I wasn't shooting sideways. And that's when the big problems started to occur. And it was so bad in the 7th grade, that was the same exact time my dad got the shooting machine. It was so bad that my dad and I were fighting, and my mom and dad took me to a psychiatrist. And they talked to a psychiatrist, and they were like, Ryan's, he's having problems with his shot. He's not playing as well, and he's getting in fights with his dad, and there's problems. But the psychiatrist was like, yeah, but he's getting straight A's. He's still the best player on this team, right? He's still doing well. Like, putting him on medicine would not be a good idea. And my parents were like, and it was weird because the psychiatrist was like, if sometimes what happens is things are too perfect, and when things are too perfect, people try to find something wrong. And he said that that's what he thinks is going on right now. But the psychiatrist was wrong. There was something wrong. It was a shooting machine, but he didn't know that. Nobody knew that. So I remember we went out of that, and my parents were like, yeah, So I didn't take medicine. This is 7th grade. But there was problems going on, but nobody knew that it was a shooting machine. So, but my point is, the reason why I bring that up is because my grandpa would later say, no, it was because you were playing against bigger, better players, and you were frustrated, and that's what the problem was. No. Why then, when I was in the 7th grade, when I was playing against, people my own age and stuff, was there still problems with me and my dad? I know it was just because of my shot. It had nothing to do with me playing against bigger, better players. Even when I was in high school, I never got in fights with my dad about how I was playing against bigger, better players. They weren't bigger and better, first off. Number one, I was a starting point guard on varsity. It wasn't that. The only thing my dad and I fought about was I wasn't shooting right. And the only thing, and I'm going to get to this, and the fights really, what they ended up happening was, and I'll get to this, I haven't explained how the fights occurred yet, but it was because once my shot got messed up, I didn't know how to fix it. My dad tried to fix it, but he ended up telling me to do the wrong thing because he didn't know. And then things just deteriorated. And then my dad was like, okay, well, I give up. And then I was like, you can't give up. I need your help. I don't know how to fix my shot. And then he's like, well, I give up, so you're on your own. And then I tried to force him to continue to help me. And then that's when the abuse started to happen. So at this point, I'm starting point guard on varsity. We won the CIF championship. Only player in my school history to start as a point guard or to start on varsity. And I'm a big time player at this point. I have a lot of colleges recruiting me, and things are going decent. But my shot is completely screwed up, and I know why now. At the time, I didn't know. At the time, I think at the time I thought the same thing as my dad. I thought it was because I was shooting overhead. That was what messed up my shot. I didn't know it was a shooting machine, so I thought, I'm shooting overhead and my shot's different now, But anyways, my game was messed up. I know it. But I was still unconscious, but I just, the fact of the matter was my shot was messed up and I wasn't shooting the same. And I thought it was because I was shooting overhead and I wasn't going to go back to shooting underhand. And even if I did try to, and I couldn't go back to shooting underhand because even if I did go back to underhand, I was still going to shoot wrong because I was picking the ball off of a rack and I didn't know how to fix it. So regardless, it was just a messed up situation. So this is the 9th grade. We win the CIF championship. Then the 10th grade comes, or I'm moving to 10th grade, and then I remember I sprained my ankle. It was right before the season, and I sprained it really bad because I was wearing my shoes and I didn't tie them, and I sprained it. And then we had a transfer come in from a different school, and I wasn't playing at the beginning of the summer because of my sprained ankle, and then that transfer student was starting at point guard. And then my dad came to my dad was at the game, and I remember the first game of the summer season, the coach started the transfer student over me, and my dad was just furious. My dad was I look at him in the stands, and my dad, you could tell my dad has a very hard time covering up his emotions, and he was just super angry and just mortified. And then after the game, my dad was like, you're leaving Harvard Westlake. You're not staying at this school. He was like, that coach is a fucking idiot. He said, you were the starting point guard. You won the CIF championship, and he's going to start another player over you. And he said, and you played good. You see, my shot was messed up. He was like, you played good your freshman year. And the fact that this coach is starting another player over you is just disrespectful. And he was like, and he said, you're leaving this school. But I was like, I don't want to leave Harvard Westlake. I want to stay here. And the thing was at the time, I knew that there was something wrong with my game. I knew that my shot was messed up at the time, but I didn't know what was wrong with it. I thought it was, again, because I was shooting overhead. I think that's what my dad thought too. I didn't know it was a shoot-away machine. If anything, remember, at that time, I thought the shoot-away machine was giving me an advantage, if anything. I had no idea. I'm I'm getting 500 shots a day. I should be having an advantage. It's so weird. It's so weird because it took me until college looking at videos to figure it out. When I looked at videos of me shooting on the shoot-away machine, I looked at videos of me shooting before and after it, and I'm like, oh, this is freaking obvious. But at the time, it wasn't obvious at all. I had no idea what was the problem. So then, so the other player starts starting over me, and my dad is just he's so upset. And then my dad says, you're leaving the school. And then my dad said, okay, well, I don't want to leave the school. I told my dad I don't want to leave the school. So my dad said, okay, well, then I'm not going to go to any of your games this year. He said, because if I go to any of your games, I'm going to kill the coach. He said, I will kill him. So he said, there's no way I'm going to go to any of your games because he's literally, that's what will happen. I'm not going to be able to control myself and I will kill him. So I was like, okay, well then I guess you're not going to be going to my games this year. So that summer, I'm practicing picking the ball off the shoot-away rack the whole summer, and my shot's still messed up. But then we go into the first game of the season, and then the first game of the season, my shot's still messed up, but then I was the leading scorer of the first game of the season, even though I came off the bench. Then the second game of the season, we played against OJ Mayo. At the time, OJ Mayo was the number one player in the country, number one ranked player in the country. And they came from out of state, and this was a really big time game. And we were at a packed stadium, like all these people there, all these scouts, all these people. And in that game, even though my shot was messed up, I made 4 3-pointers in a row because somehow I think that like I got into the zone, like where like something happened. Even though my shot was messed up, like even if you look at my shot in that game, I was shooting, because at that point what I started doing was I was picking the ball off the rack, but I started hopping into my shots. And even if you look at that game, I would shoot the ball like I was picking the ball off a rack. Like the ball would be at my left hip, and I'd pick it up and I would shoot it. But I made 4 3-pointers that game. And then that was in the newspaper. You know, I made 4 3-pointers, and you know everyone's talking about it. And because OJ Mayo was guarding me, so everyone's like, "Oh yeah, Ryan made 4 3-pointers against OJ Mayo." And then so remember, my dad had said, I'm not going to go to any of your games. And he wasn't going to any of my games. The whole summer, he didn't go to any of my games. He was upset. He said he was going to kill the coach. But then the third game of the season, my dad comes to the game. And I know it's because the first 2 games of the season, the first game I'm the leading scorer, second game I make 4 3-pointers in a row on OJ Mayo. Then my dad's like, okay, Ryan's actually playing good. So in my mind, I'm like, okay, yeah, my dad's superficial. You know, he said it was because of the coach, but really he was just, you know, there's a big superficial component about it. Now that I'm playing good, he wants to go to my game. So then he goes to the game. But I remember, I think it was like I played bad that game. So then my dad doesn't go to the next game. And he doesn't go to the next game. But then I played really good like the next game. And then my dad would go to the next game. So I started to recognize that whenever I played good, my dad would be going. Now, again, everything's dismissive of me. So I told my grandpa about this after college, or, you know, after I graduated from college. I told my grandpa how this is what happened with me and my dad. And my grandpa was like, Ryan, it wasn't because your dad's superficial that he started going to those games. It was because when you were playing well, you treated your dad with respect and you were happy. And when you're happy, your dad's happy because you're being respectful and you're treating him well. But when you were playing bad, you weren't treating him well. But I want to say this kind of like it's like kind of silly, because the way I just described it, I think it's clear to everybody that wasn't what happened. What happened was, at first he was saying he's not going to go because he was mad at the coach. Then he's like, okay, I am going to go, but you know, because he did go after I made the 4 3-pointers against OJ Mayo. But then he's like, but then I play bad, and it's a lot more complicated than my grandpa wanted to make it out to be. But my grandpa's big thing is, I think that he was always on my dad's side, and he always wanted to make me the bad guy. And I think that my grandpa has a lot of respect for my dad. It's his son. And he doesn't have a lot of respect for me, and I'm going to get to why. But keep in mind, my grandpa lived in Kauai at this time. My grandpa had no idea how good of a player I was growing up. He lived on an island far from me. I only visited him like a couple times on the island. So he didn't know me growing up. So, but he did know me around 11th grade when he came to Los Angeles. But by that point, remember, things are completely screwed up in my household at that time. At that time, there was a lot of abuse going on. My game was completely messed up. So when my grandpa's coming, he's like, he doesn't think I'm that good. He sees me playing really bad because he came during a bad time in my life. So he didn't have a lot of respect for me. So my grandpa, in my mind, he's thinking like, yeah, Ryan, it wasn't because of the shoot-away machine. It's because you're playing against bigger, better players, and your dad didn't go to your games because you were treating him bad, and he's trying to make me into the bad guy. But my grandpa's big thing is you have to take responsibility. Like, you have to take. He said, because he says it's never good to blame people. All you can do is work on yourself. Blaming others is never going to help because you can't change others, apparently. And I don't know if that's true. In my opinion, yeah, you can change people. You can influence people. And the way that my grandpa went about things, in my opinion, he influenced my family in a very negative light because he influenced my family to further alienate me, in my opinion. But in his the way that he describes things, you can't change others. All you can do is change yourself and work on yourself. Now, in my opinion, that's not true. You can influence people. And I think that he influenced people in a very negative light. Now, regardless, at this point, my grandpa's saying that's all I wanted to illustrate with my grandpa. He didn't believe, he wanted to make me into the bad guy. That's my opinion. Now, he would say, because he's a metapsychiatrist, I'm going to get to that later, but he would say, I'm not blaming you, Ryan. I'm blaming your software. It's never the person to blame. It's always his software, his consciousness. But basically what he's trying to say is you had a lower level of software, and that's why the problems occurred. Now, I'm not going to lie. Maybe I didn't have perfect software. But my point, though, is I do think that he messed things up in a way that it wouldn't have been messed up if it wasn't for him. And I'm going to get to that next in the story.